It was the early 1920s, an era that found social patterns lying in utter chaos. On one hand were the traditionalists who were worried that everything valuable was ending, and on the other hand were the younger modernists who no longer looked to society to approve their behavior. These ones instead concerned themselves with whether their behavior met the approval of their intellect. It became a case of who would dominate American culture, the traditionalists or the modernists. People, but most especially journalists, were looking for a dramatic display of both views, and they found one in a Dayton, Tennessee courtroom in summer of 1925. Before then, State Representative John Washington Butler, who was a Tennessee farmer and head of the World Christian Fundamentals Association, influenced state legislators to pass anti-evolution laws. In February 1925, the Tennessee state legislature passed the Butler Act, which declared it unlawful for any teacher in a public school to teach any theory that denies the story of divine creation of man and taught in the Bible, and to teach instead that man descended from a lower order of animals. Of course, this was the first of such acts to be passed in Southern legislature, and so it attracted some attention from the concerned groups such as the American Civil Liberties Association. The Butler Act prohibited the teaching of evolution in all educational institutions, and this angered pro-evolution associations in the state. In response to the Butler Act, the American Civil Liberties Association offered to defend any teacher that was prosecuted under the law. George Rapplier, a 32-year-old local coal company manager, led the opposition as they announced their willingness to defend anyone who challenged the new Tennessee anti-evolution statute. From Rapplier's point of view, the opposition and trial would not just be a way to oppose the new law, but also be a way to put Dayton on the map. School Superintendent Walter White agreed that the publicity generated by a controversial trial might help their town, seeing as population of Dayton had fallen from 3,000 in 1890s to 1,800 in 1925. The association chose 24-year-old general science teacher and part-time football coach John Scopes to spearhead this endeavor. John agreed with the group that it was impossible to teach biology without teaching evolution. Scopes even brought out a copy of George William Hunter's Civic Biology, which was the state-approved textbook that described theory of evolution, race, and eugenics. Incidentally, Scopes had been filling in for the regular biology teacher. He had assigned readings on evolution from the book. This was proof that Scopes had broken the law, and it was the single evidence brought against him. However, it was because Scopes publicly announced that he had taught evolution that he was arrested, but it was all part of the plan, as he and the group intended for it to happen so that he could test the law in court. The trial became a publicized controversy between modernists who said evolution was not inconsistent with religion and traditionalists or fundamentalists who said the Word of God, as revealed in the Bible, took priority over all human knowledge. Rapplier argued that while the Butler Act banned the teachings of the theory of evolution, the state required teachers to use a textbook that explicitly described and endorsed the theory of evolution. This meant that teachers were effectively required to break the law. On May 7, 1925, John Scopes was arrested and charged with teaching the theory of evolution. At first, Herb Berry and Sue Hicks, two local attorneys and friends of Scopes, agreed to prosecute, even though Rapplier initially wanted H.G. Wells, a science fiction writer, to head the defense team because he hoped it would draw more publicity. But Clarence Darrow, who was a longtime criminal defense lawyer with several prominent cases under his belt, jumped on the case. Darrow was an agnostic, and he initially declined the offer to head the defense team because he was afraid his presence would create a circus atmosphere. However, with the prosecution team choosing three-time Democratic presidential nominee and lawyer William Jennings Bryan as the lead, Darrow realized that the trial would be a circus with or without him, so he agreed to head the defense. The trial drew so much attention that it was covered by journalists from the South and around the world, including the famous H.L. Mencken, who worked from the Baltimore Sun. It was Mencken that gave the trial colorful labels such as the Monkey Trial. The Scopes trial, or the Monkey Trial, began on the 10th of July, 1925. The jury was made up of locals who consisted of 10 farmers, a landowner, a shipping clerk. Interestingly, of the 12 jury members, 6 were Baptists, 4 were Methodists, 1 was a member of the Disciples of the Church, and 1 was not a member of any church. At first, the ACLU just wanted to oppose the Butler Act on the grounds that it violated the teachers' individual rights and academic freedom, and was therefore unconstitutional. But because of Darrow, the strategy changed as the trial progressed. The defense team tried to ridicule the law by comparing the anti-evolution provision to the Galileo case. The Galileo case had been condemned for teaching any theory which denies the alleged Bible story that the Earth is the center of the universe and to teach instead that the Earth and the planets move about the sun. The presiding judge, J.T. Ralston, was not moved by the arguments from the history of science, and so the trial proceeded. Bryan's strategy was quite simple. Unlike the defense team that was trying to prove that Tennessee law was unconstitutional, Bryan was aiming to prove that John Scopes was guilty of violating the law. The monkey trial achieved one of its goals as it drew public attention to it. It was recorded that about 1,000 people and more than 100 newspapers packed the courtroom every day. The trial drew extensive media attention, but nationally and internationally, as it became the first ever trial to be broadcasted live on the radio. Interestingly, the judge, who was conservative Christian, began each day's court proceeding with prayer and did not allow the defense to call any expert scientific witnesses. But was even more interesting, to the point of ironic, was that Scopes convinced students to testify against him and even coached them in their answers. The judge refused to hear the scientific witnesses for the defense because he claimed that the question was not whether the evolution was true, but whether Scopes was in violation of the Butler. Scopes had already admitted to committing the crime, and even recruited students to admit to it too. It should have been a simple case, but the validity of evolution was irrelevant to the trial. What was of interest was the attitudes and motivation of both parties. The judge was accused of being biased toward the prosecution team, and he frequently clashed with Darrow. It was reported that the judge warned the jury not to judge the merit of the law, but the violation of the act. The jury foreman was not convinced about the merit of the act, but he acted on the instructions of the judge, and slowly the case became a fight of religion versus freedom of speech. Bryan criticized evolution for teaching children that humans were but one of 35,000 types of mammals, and he expressed his disapproval and displeasure of the notion that human beings were descended not even from American monkeys, but from Old World monkeys. In response, Darrow argued that the Bible should be preserved in the realm of theology and mortality and not put in a course of science. And to support his point, he did something quite dramatic and unorthodox. On the 7th day of the trial, with the proceeding being held on the lawn in front of the courthouse because of the heat and the need for more room for spectators, Darrow called Bryan to the stand as a defense witness. Darrow's questioning revealed Bryan's view of the literal truth of the Bible. He questioned him on the range of the Bible stories such as John swallowed by a whale, Noah and the flood, the days of creation, Cain's wife, and the temptation in the Garden of Eden. Bryan took to the stand believing that Darrow would in turn submit to questioning. Darrow used these Bible stories to show that they should not be used in teaching science. Bryan fell into every trap and undermined his credibility when he stated, "I do not think about things I do not think about." And the judge ended up striking the entire interrogation from the records. After 8 press-filled days of the trial, the jury gave a verdict of guilty in less than 9 minutes. Scopes was found guilty of violating the Butler Act and was fined $100. But it was all part of the plan, as the defense team wanted the judge to find Scopes guilty so they could appeal to the Supreme Court. When the verdict eventually got to the Supreme Court, it was reversed on a technicality. He had been fined extensively. Supporters of both sides claimed victory after the trial, as the verdict was overturned and the Butler Act was upheld, continuing the anti-evolution movement. After the trial, Mississippi passed a similar law to the Butler Act, and in 1925, Texas also banned the theory of evolution from high school textbooks. Tennessee continued to ban the teachings of evolution until the act was repealed in 1968. The Scopes trial might have happened in the 20th century. However, the controversy over the teaching of science and evolution has continued into the 21st century. Even though there's a consensus among scientists that humans evolved from apes and less desirable traits are weeded out over time, the theory of evolution is still a controversial topic among the American public. Because of this, creationists have adopted a new strategy calling for balanced treatment in the teaching of evolution and the creation. They demand that special creation be taught as a science and that evolution should be described as a theory. However, the Supreme Court has ruled that the state laws that require balanced treatment for creation science were unconstitutional. Some states have removed evolution from their curricula and given local school boards the right to teach evolution. This is despite the fact that as an authority, the National Academy of Science and the National Science Foundation have identified evolution as the unifying concept of modern biology. Moreover, the theory of evolution has been refined in the light of new scientific discoveries. Evolution still remains unsurpassed in its ability to provide a detailed explanation for both the diversity and the history of life on Earth. As such, American science education has gone through several changes from evolution science to creation science to a blend of both. Currently, though, American science education is desiring to promote the education and evidence-based scientific concepts. The field of American science education now includes science content, science process using a scientific method, and some social science. But while creationism as science in schools has been deemed unconstitutional, creationists haven't exactly given up the fight. The controversy between evolution and religion will probably always be an ongoing issue, but for now, American science education is sticking with evolution science. No one, not even science, can predict if that will change in the future. And with that, we've come to the end of this video. For more interesting videos like this, be sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and turn on that bell notification so you never miss an upload. Thank you very much for watching. Catch you guys in the next video.